Let's continue mastering the technique of root weaving. In the previous tutorial we've got to know the main root weaving principles and tried weaving a normal round shape. Today I'm going to show you how to vary the shape and how to shape the angles. Depending on the way you distribute the angles, you can weave a leaf-shaped item with a single angle, two opposite angles create the shape like this. Here is a triangular shape I've demonstrated in the previous tutorial. Here you can see a 4-angled square item. I've even tried weaving a 5-angled item too. I mean, the shape you're going to get as a result depends on the number of angles you make. But before talking about angles, let me share my joy with you. I believe it may be useful for many of you, because much depends on the kind of paper you weave with, the item's neatness and relief. While experimenting, I found out that not glossy paper alone can result in a nice-looking work. Working with normal advertising booklets has proven to be very nice too. The paper they are made of is not glossy, it is normal newspaper, but rather thin and high quality. Here are the tubes made of Eve network catalogs. I mean, normal paper can be quite good for this purpose as well. After you've got used to the technique, you can start weaving with normal advertising newspaper. As for this item, I like the way it is, unpainted. I had some advertising booklets, different pages result in tubes of different colors. I sorted them out, put the light tubes apart, started weaving with the light tubes, continued with the brighter ones, and finished with the darkest tubes. As a result, I've got kind of gradient. Well, but actually it's rather recherche. If you don't like the style, you may paint the ready item. In order to make our tutorial more informative, I'd like to show you the way I start weaving a novel item. What I mean is, the base doesn't necessarily have to be round. As an option, you can make the base oval-shaped. I take a tube, bend it, try your best not to over-tighten it at the angles. I've already made 4 coils. I believe the 4th coil is high time to start. Take the next tube, a working one. Soften it a bit like this. Start weaving in this direction. Adjoin a tube this way. You can either glue the tail or just fasten it with your fingers. And start wrapping the base. I've tried a few options of wrapping and selected this one. Wrap the basic tube all alone. So the 4 coils of the basic tube have been wrapped over almost up to the very end. Now, in order to get prepared for easy working in the next row, make a few coils round the tube of the base. Three coils have been performed already. Continue in the same very way as we did with the round bottom. In the first row, it is easier to lead a working tube through the coil alone. And continue this way. Let me share one more new trick. I've tried using a barbecue skewer instead of an awl. Most weavers have such skewers because we usually use them to keep the pole straight. Take a look, please. This one is very good. It is very convenient. If the end is not sharp enough, you can sharpen it additionally. In my case, it's been polished with my fingers already. A skewer like this is even easier to work with than a sewing awl is. Last time I said that Dragon polymeric adhesive is very good to work with. It is, however, school glue has proven to be acceptable for this purpose too. Looks like it's time to cut the tail at the point of gluing. After you do, you've got a sharp end to embroider with as if with a needle. Hold the joint carefully with your fingers. And continue embroidering as if with the help of a needle. In the first row, I grab the coils only, because it is easier this way. In the following rows, I'm going to grab both the coils and the previous row. Reach the end and make a few coils here too. Try to make as many coils as you've made from the opposite side. Try to keep them symmetric. I've made the coils. Let's continue. In the first row, I'm leading my working tube through the coils only. Since the tube has been cut at the point of gluing, the tube end is rigid enough to go through the loop prepared with the help of a skewer. As a result, I've got a workpiece for an oval bottom. Further, you weave in circle, adding the coils at the turning points. In the same way as I've done here. Let me show you once again. So, the first row is finished. I've reached the additional coils. Here at the turns, I apply the same very technique. Make 2 coils and lead the tube under the first coil out. Make 2 coils again and lead through the second coil. It results in widening. Continue weaving in a traditional way, leading the working tube through the previous row together with the coil. You're already familiar with this technique. Let me draw your attention to the following point. The looser the loops are, the easier it is to weave. Don't tighten the loops. Leave some vacant space. A vacant space will make leading a tube through much easier in the following row. This way you make the process of weaving much nicer and easier. Take a look, please. I cut the tube at a very sharp angle, which makes inserting very deep. And try your best to hold the joint with your fingers thoroughly. The joint is strong and almost invisible. It is time to cut the tube at a sharp angle in the most rigid point of gluing. When we apply our traditional technique, we usually cut this segment off because it is different in color and too rigid. In our current case, this rigid place works in our favor. It allows us embroidering as if with a needle. This sharp end pierces the cloth like a needle. In case you do everything right and don't tighten the previous row too much, the process is rather comfortable. Continue in the same way as we've done while weaving a round bottom. As a result, you get an oval-shaped item. Let me draw your attention to the point of turning once again. Make one more additional coil in order to avoid bigger intervals between the coils and keep the weaving dense. Perform neat turn and continue. If the intervals between the coils become too big, you can add more coils. Try to make additional coils symmetric from both sides in order to keep the item shape smooth. Let's get back to angles. How to shape a leaf, for example. A leaf consists of one angle. The starting point of the row is usually where there is a longer stitch at the end of the first row or the beginning of the second one. It is where I start shaping an angle. The first coil is performed in a normal way. The only difference is that you don't adjust the tube of the base close, but shape it as a loop like this. Hark the loop and continue weaving. We are going to face peculiarities in the second row. In the first row you just shape a loop. Further you continue weaving a row in a normal way, like we usually do, until you reach the loop. I finished the row, reached the loop, shape the tube of the base as a loop again, a bigger one. Now lead a working tube through the previous loop. Turn neatly and lead it through the coil as we usually do. This way I've got a small loop unengaged. So far it is not clearly seen that the item is a leaf shaped. However, with every following row, this angle is going to become more and more visible. Moreover, the leaf shape depends on where you started shaping a corner. If you need a more roundish leaf, you don't start shaping an angle from the very beginning, but after you've woven a circle like this, a bigger one. In this case, your leaf will be of a more round shape. If you start shaping an angle from the very center, you will get a more prolonged leaf. You can get a still more prolonged leaf if you weave it based on an oval bottom and shape an angle at a definite point. What I mean is, there's different possible options to shape your leaf depending on your preferences. Continue weaving, shaping such a loop at a definite point in every row. Now the leaf shape is clearly seen. Let's weave an angle once again. Take a note, please. You have to be able to adjust the loop size. Take a look. These loops were too big while I was just training and getting used to the process. The following ones are more or less smooth. The ability to shape loops of a regular required size in order to make them look neat comes with practice. So, you lead a working tube through the previous loop and round it. Shape a new loop for the next row and very carefully repeat one and the same movements. And you see, this side looks neat and smooth. There's no problem. In order to keep the second side smooth as well, you have to get used and shape the coils very neatly in the same very way every time. Smoothen and continue this way up to the required size of the leaf. The principle is clear, isn't it? Here you can see the way the angles look in practice on a ready item. I'd like to draw your attention to one more essential point: how to finish an item, on a sample of this unfinished item. Take a note, please, that there's some intervals between the coils. They can be bigger or smaller depending on how dense your weaving is. It's up to you to choose. I personally prefer tighter weaving. Take a look, please. Here I've got intervals between the coils, while here on a finished item the coils are joined to each other rather tightly. Here on this item it is clearly seen as well. There's no intervals between the coils. In order to get a result like this, in the last row you have to cut the tube of the base I usually drop some glue in order to keep it from sliding out. After which you start wrapping. Lead under the previous row. In my case, the weaving is rather loose, so I can make 2 additional coils between the loops. Take a look, please. I wrap it once and once again. It's time to lengthen the tube. Let me do it. In this case, you have to insert one tube into another especially deep, because the tube is subject to much deformation. In this case, I've got enough space for 2 coils too. Depending on how tight your weaving is, you can make either 1 or 2 coils. The task is to hide the tube of the base, which will make the item look neat. Such a peculiar way of finishing items like this. Continue performing 2 coils each time, in our case. It is the way the edge of the finished item looks. Well, actually I've shared what I'd like to. In the process of mastering the technique, I faced some more peculiarities. So I'm going to continue working with this technique and getting to know it better. Thanks again to Elena Lamokhina, whose works have fascinated me as well as many other weavers. As far as I see, this technique, root weaving, is getting more and more popular. Good luck to you in mastering new methods of weaving.